Welcome everyone to our session, School Building Science Fridays on building operators as school building scientists. I am Elizabeth Crouchide, former managing director of CHPS and now senior advisor. I'm very happy to have you here today and to be talking about this topic. We brought about this series on school building science because we wanted to both make sure people understand our point of view on how important different science aspects are to school buildings, but also because we wanted to make sure everybody understands that they have a role in building science. And so we wanted to demystify it in that sense. Our moderator today is Raffi Manjikian. He is Chief Operating Officer at Intervial Data Systems and has been there since 2003. Intervial Data Systems is an enterprise energy management company focused on delivering building automation solutions to the K-12, higher education, and healthcare marketplaces. Raffi is also the newly appointed co-chair of the CHPS National Technical Committee. We're very excited to have him in that role. And he'll be helping to lead the NTC through a strategic revitalization and the next round of updates to our national criteria. Raffi is going to kick off some context for you and pose questions to our panelists, Ken Wertz and Mike Wilson, and then we'll have time for audience questions. You can post your questions at any time in the chat box. And at first, I want to say many thanks to our sponsors. We have Into Architecture, Group 14 Engineering, Perkins and Eastman, Healthy Schools Network, and Tarkett. And there is still room to offer a sponsorship if you want to participate. You can just send one of us an email. And with that, let me just go over a little bit of housekeeping. So as I said, post your questions at any time in the chat and please stay on mute. Then we will make the recording and the slides available to you. I'll send them out to all registrants after the session, and also we'll post them on the website. And at the very end of the slide deck, we won't be going over them today in the live session, but they are available to you when you download the slides. There will be some links for more information. And so let me hand it over to Raffi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and welcome again to our Building Operators as School Building Scientists session today for our Building Science Fridays. As I was thinking about making some opening comments, this panel presentation today was particularly important for me as I listened and reflected on the announcement from the White House that President Biden had just signed an executive order guiding the federal government to achieve zero net emissions in all its buildings, campuses, and installations. And my thoughts went particularly to the panelists that are going to be speaking today, that building operators play an all too important role to assure that goals, be them at the local, state, or federal level, to be achieved relies a lot on those guys on the ground. And in particular, our folks impact the lives of many students, and to have the optimal conditions to learn and be successful, and impact, obviously, millions of staff and teachers throughout our nation. So I wanted to go ahead and set some context by going through some definitions, and I'll begin with what is building science. And it's that multidisciplinary field that informs us how buildings function as a dynamic system involving the physical sciences, engineering, architecture, and the life sciences. And the goal of building science is to make buildings comfortable, energy efficient, and healthy for the occupants for the life of the building. Next slide, please. And in particular, what is school building science? It's that body of knowledge about the built environment that impacts how children learn, and it's for the benefit of students, educators, and staff with the least amount of impact on the environment. Next slide, Elizabeth. To take a step back and look at maybe the 10,000 foot level, and this is familiar to most folks on the call today, the backdrop of our work, we impact over 50 million students, and it's the workplace for millions of staff and teachers across 165,000 schools in our nation, both public and private. It's the second largest sector of public infrastructure spending after highways. And as we were moving into the pandemic, a GAO report came out in 2020 that found that 41% of districts required significant HVAC system upgrades or replacements in at least half of their schools. Perennially, this is not lost on anyone here on the call, public schools operate in a world of thinning budgets and growing deferred maintenance requests, while dealing with new technologies, codes, and standards that are changing the work and setting the bar higher each and every year. Let's go to the next slide, please. So today I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists, Ken Wertz and Mike Wilson. And in doing so, why don't we go to the next slide, Elizabeth, as well. Some of the roles that these folks play and what makes facility operators building scientists, I'll leave on the screen, and I'll do that as I make my introduction to both Ken and Mike. We're fortunate to have both our speakers here today, and in particular, Ken Wertz is the Executive Director for the Massachusetts Facilities Administrators Association and the former Director of Maintenance and Operations for the Sharon Public Schools in Sharon, Mass. He also serves on the MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority, as on the designer selection panel, and on the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's reopening site support team that was launched in response to the COVID pandemic. Our second speaker today, Mike Wilson, has been the Director of Facilities for Warren County, Kentucky Public Schools since 2015. In this role, he oversees the district's custodial services and energy management, ensuring his department delivers exceptional service to the district's more than 17,000 students and 2,500 adult employees. Mike has also served on the Warren County Board of Education and oversee the renovation of 5 schools and the construction of 7 schools, including the nation's first net zero energy elementary school, Richardsville Elementary. Mike has also recently joined the CHPS Board of Directors. So as we get started in our conversation, I would like to be able to pose 2 questions to our panelists. Elizabeth, next slide, please.
Raffi, just so you know, Mike is trying to log in now. He didn't have the link to log in, so he's working on it.
All right. So I'll lead off with you, Ken.
Oh, great. Thanks. That's what I needed.
So how do we sustain, as we get into this discussion, how do we sustain the achievement of high performance goals? And something else to consider during your presentation, how do we tap into the next generation of management professionals in buildings?
Well, thank you. Thank you for framing everything out. And Elizabeth, thank you for reaching out. This is a really important topic that we're talking about. So how do we sustain our high performance goals? That's a big question that we're still trying to figure out the answer for. The people who seem to be successful building new buildings that are high performing buildings that are meeting their goals are the communities that know the importance of adequately funding and staffing the maintenance of their buildings. You see it all over the country where people will build a new building and the new building's controls start acting all wacky, and they blame the building. They don't blame themselves for not hiring a building operator. They don't blame themselves for not funding an HVAC tech position. They don't blame themselves. They blame the new technology. So how do I see that we can get there and achieve it? We need to make sure that at a base level, we know what it takes to fund and adequately staff and properly maintain our buildings. And I'm sure that you're seeing the same struggle, Raffi, as well, with the people that they're talking to. Sorry, Mike needs the passcode for the login. Let me get that to him, and then Mike will be with us. Look at me multitasking. Not that well, by the way. There. Sorry about that, everyone. So in my role, when I'm a reformed facilities director, I was in Sharon for 18 years, and that was always the struggle of trying to figure out how to get those budgets, how to get them squared away, because you're fighting against conflicting interests, right? Our schools are in the business of educating students. Typically, our school administrators or superintendents, our business officials know an awful lot about curriculum instruction. They know about student mental health and wellness. They don't know the mil thickness of a trash liner. They don't know, there's Mike. They don't know, the coefficient of friction on a floor. They don't know, how to put down a fully adhered roof system. That's where we fall in. So what happens, certainly pre-pandemic, building maintenance and operations were oftentimes considered a necessary evil. We don't like the roof leaking, but we're going to cut your roofing budget to maintain that. It's like, oh, well, okay. So how am I going to I've got a lot of empty 5-gallon buckets, wax buckets that I can put underneath that dripping roof, but that's not really the best way to maintain your buildings. I've even gone as far to have discussions with our school board that, we'll wash the floors with water. If that's really what you want us to do, if that's what you're willing to fund us for, just realize the impact that's going to have on the health of the building. You can't fund a C or a D, performance and expect an A or a B turnaround on work quality. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good afternoon, doing well.
Hey, Mike, welcome.
Thank you.
So Mike, Raffi was just framing out our discussion today, and we were just leading off with this question of how do we sustain high performance goals and achieve those goals versus just saying, yep, we built a brand new CHPS building like you have down in Kentucky, and then all of a sudden people walk away thinking, what's going on with this building? Why is it not meeting our goals?
Absolutely. And a lot of, I agree with everything you said. It takes a lot of buy-in from every level. It takes it from our school board. It takes it from our senior management, from our superintendent, to CFO, COO, and it takes it from the building level as well. We have to have principals that understand our energy performance goals, building performance goals, and why it's important for them to maintain those within their building. And so it really does make it all the more important that everyone that understands what the goals are and is in agreement that we want to sustain those goals, not just in the short term, but in the long term.
Mike, have you run into, and I've seen a lot of this as well, there's a lot of turnover with people in higher level administrative positions. Superintendents have usually a 3 to 4 year shelf life. I've been through, when I was working in Sharon, I probably worked for 5 different superintendents over the course of my tenure. And I noticed that as those seats change, so does the ability to sustain the goals that the prior administration had set forth. I had one superintendent that we shared an energy manager position with another local community. We split the position, down the middle, 50-50. And that was great. And we reduced a ton of energy consumption while still keeping people, thermally comfortable and everything. But when that administration changed and when people shift and moved around, it fell apart just because we didn't have that buy-in. So that's my bigger thing that I always seem to struggle with, Raffi, is you can sustain it short term when you have the buy-in from everyone that's with you. But how does that administration or how does that school board hand off that buy-in to the next administration coming in?
I agree with you. The continuity and the sustaining those efforts, it's not a casual relationship. It's something that it's a long haul, and sometimes it could take decades to maintain those, make those stakes and keep those goals in mind. You just can't flip every 5 years, 3-5 years to go ahead in that direction.
Well, in our district, we have maybe kind of the opposite. We have a very stable school board, very long tenured. And then on top of that, our superintendent, so like he's been with us for 8 years. He's getting ready to start his 3rd contract. So he's going to be 12 years. Prior to that, we had a superintendent who was, he had a 4-year contract, but he was assistant superintendent prior to that. Before him, that superintendent was here for 15 or 16 years. So we've had a track record of long stability in our superintendent's position. But where we found the turnover more so is at the building level with the principal. So since Richardsville Elementary School's been open, we've had 5 principals in that building. So that's where the challenge is, because that's really, to use a trite phrase, where the rubber meets the road. It's in that building on a daily basis where your energy is being used. And so that's where you can set a goal at the district level. A superintendent can have his or her expectations, but it's really up to the principal in every building to make sure that those goals are met. So we've really had stability from the upper end of things, if you want to say, but out at the building levels where the challenges really arise. But we do have a very long-standing understanding in our district that energy consumption and energy management is a primary goal in what we do. because we understand as a board, as a superintendent, as a district, that a lot of the funds, whatever dollars we can save from energy management, goes right back into the general fund. It goes to textbooks, it goes to computers and bus drivers and salaries. So there's a tangible, those goals set up tangible dollars and cents at the end of it. So that is something that we've been consistent on, and to the point where in Kentucky, we're the most energy efficient school district in the state. But that takes a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of work to be able to do something like that. But to maintain it's where the real challenge lies.
So for Mike and Ken, what is the burden on at your level to make sure that your staff are, trained and knowledgeable and aware of being able to operationalize some of these goals on a daily basis? What effort does that take on your part to go ahead and drive forward to your school boards or in the districts?
I'll go first, Mike, if you don't mind. Some of the messages that I keep sharing with any decision makers that I come across is the idea and the concept that you have a couple of options as far as the skills of the technicians working in your district. And this is how a lot of us in my association, a lot of my colleagues across the country that we talk about and discuss, do you have someone internally that has the skill set to run these sophisticated systems? Do you have a mic on your team? If you don't, do you have someone that has the capacity to learn those skills? If you send someone to school, will they be able to pick up and start running with it? If you don't have either of those, a district is kind of looking at outsourcing that component. Hiring a skilled, contractor who can log into your system remotely and make sure it's running and operating the way it should. The days of project closeout where your head custodian receives 20 hours of training on this, multi-million-dollar state-of-the-art facility, is woefully inadequate. And I try to relate it to, if someone gets a new laptop or the first time someone's trying to learn Microsoft Office, do you receive 20 hours of training to learn how to use Excel? Probably not. You probably had a couple hundred. And this is the disconnect that I see in our industry, is that we don't provide adequate training and continued sustained training for these technicians. It's just like, it's software. So it gets updated, it gets upgraded, and the mechanics of why they're changing set points, looking at CO2 from a health standpoint, are we training them that as well? Or are we just saying, no, keep it 72 degrees and just, that's all you need to know?
Well, in Warren County Schools here in Bowling Green, Kentucky, we have internal partners and external partners. So we do have highly trained, highly skilled maintenance department that understands the importance of our energy goals. But we also partner with a third-party vendor that does have access to our information, can track some of this information for us and let us know, hey, we're meeting our goals, not meeting our goals. But it even goes down to our custodians, because in reality, it's the custodians that see things first. They may see a water fountain or a water faucet that's leaking. They may see a toilet that runs. They may see the lights stay on in a room that's hardly, if ever, occupied. Lights that are on after the building is unoccupied. So that's a huge challenge, because we're already understaffed as a custodial staff. And their first and foremost opportunity is to keep the building clean. But on top of that, we impress the importance of the energy performance goals that we have as a district. So that's an ongoing. It's never like, okay, we've received that training and then we move on, because we do have turnover in our custodial staff, and to a certain extent in our maintenance staff. We do continuous training. As a matter of fact, next week is our last week of school for our students in the building. The following Monday, I'm having a training for my custodians to go over all these issues, because I can't assume, obviously, if you're a new hire, you may not be aware of it. But even our tenured custodians that have been here for 5, 10, 15 years, sometimes you get in the groove and you just kind of take things for granted. And we want to make sure that this is always to the forefront of their mind, and make sure that doors and windows are closed, when lights are turned off, things of that nature. Lights are turned on when they're supposed to. So it's just a constant won't call it a struggle. It's just a constant thing that we have to do as a district to make sure that we are meeting our goals, and we just can't take it for granted. And that would be easy for our district to do, because we could say, okay, Warren County Public Schools, we were the nation's first net zero school. We're the state's most energy efficient district, and just kind of rest on our laurels. But we can't afford to do that, because we could easily get off track with what our goals are, and we don't want to do that.
And something that is an option right now for folks that I'm not sure everyone's aware of, HVAC training for public schools. There is funding available from the federal government as part of the CARES Act, as part of the COVID relief funding. You can send your people for training to, Honeywell headquarters in Chicago, or wherever the heck, whatever system you're running, and you can file for grant money through the federal CARES Act to cover that expense. So it's not very often that we can find funding, at our disposal to better operate our building. So I do encourage people to look at that if it's always been a struggle for you, oh, we can't afford to have our people out of the building for a day. Oh, we can't afford to send them, to fly them and go put them up at a hotel so they can have 3 or 4 days of really, really intensive professional development. Well, now you can. So hopefully having that taken off the table as a hurdle might help some districts. It might help some communities that haven't been able to do that before.
And I might add to that, I've heard that before, but we can't afford to do what Warren County Public Schools do. And my response to that is, I believe you can't afford not to do it, because you build a building once. At one time it's built, but every day, every month, every year after that, you heat it, you cool it, you light it for decades. And so if you don't properly manage and maintain these assets that you have, it's going to cost you more money in the long run if the people that are there to maintain it and operate it aren't properly educated and trained on how to do that.
But Mike, it sounds like clearly you have, and Warren County Schools has made a commitment and has stood by that commitment with dollars and with human resources in form of a team, and also providing you the support to go ahead and do this continuous training.
Yes, sir. It's been, and I'll just add as a footnote, before I joined the district as a facilities director, I spent 12 years on the Board of Education. So as the person that, so to speak, raises your property taxes, I definitely wanted to make sure that we squeezed every penny out of every dollar to make sure that if I come to you and say, hey, Mr. or Ms. Taxpayer, we need to raise more funds for our schools, that we could, with a clear conscience, say, here's what we've done, to justify your trust in us for additional expenditures. So yes, it's an important goal for us to. We take great pride in the fact that we do have the nation's first net zero energy school, but that wasn't the goal when we started out. We were the first district in the state to have an energy manager on staff. Well, that one decision alone has helped this district to date avoid, cost avoidance over $16 million. Those are real dollars that didn't go into energy expenditures. They went into other, back into the general fund that could be used for our growth district. So when you lay the groundwork to that, when you lay that groundwork, you can build off that to help come up with monies and dollars to do the continuous training.
No, it's laudable, and if I remember correctly, your first zero net energy school was not because of a goal that was set by a legislature or some other entity. It was because you wanted to do the right thing.
Absolutely. We had no one from our state government, state capital in Frankfort, Kentucky, no one from Washington, D.C. said, hey, Warren County Schools, why don't you do the first net zero school? As a matter of fact, I've told people, if you went back 15 years ago and you put a map of the United States on the wall and said, where are we going to build the nation's first net zero energy school? I can assure you no one would have said in Richardsville, Kentucky, a little community that doesn't even have a zip code. But we made it happen there. But it took a whole lot of work beforehand to get us to the point where we could do something like that.
All right. So I think, Elizabeth, there's some next set of questions I'd like to pose to the guys. And, I think it's a natural next step here in our panel today. Where are we heading? What is the changing profession and the conversation that we need to have? And if there are lessons to be learned, what did we learn from the pandemic that impact our school building scientists as building operators?
I think part of what is changing is just the awareness of how important schools are. And I think kind of bridging both those questions, we found out very quickly how important schools are. We kind of have taken it for granted that, oh, it's school and we just send our kids to school. But we found out that it's very difficult for parents to get back to work when their children are home and they don't have any other options. And no, it's not just, well, we're just babysitting kids. I mean, kids are learning, kids are being instructed, not just in, reading, writing, arithmetic, as we used to call it, but how do we interact with other people? How do we, learn as a society what our expectations are? So, when you look at, I think I saw some statistics the other day, like 1 out of every 5 citizens in the United States is in a K-12 school, either as a student or a staff member. So that's a pretty big part of our population. And so if they're going to be in that school setting, 8+ hours a day, it is very important that our buildings are high performing. Are they energy efficient? Indoor air quality, which is always an issue, becoming even more so because of that pandemic. So those are some of the things that I think the lessons that we learned that were kind of forced upon us to learn. As far as the changing profession, we continue to have the baby boomers generation that continues to retire. And are we letting that vast knowledge just walk out the door with them? Or are we training the people that are currently working with those people? Are they learning that knowledge? Are they imparting that knowledge to them so that it doesn't just walk out the door and we can keep that knowledge and that information that's been learned over years and years? How do we keep that in our district? And then as we hire new people to come in, the younger generation, so to speak, take the talents and abilities that they have and merge them into the existing workforce that we do have, so that when they come on board, maybe they have experience working in a factory setting or some other setting, but that they learn what's important in a K-12 or in an education setting. So it's, we talk as educators, we're educating kids, but we're also educating adults too, as to what expectations are in our district and the information and knowledge that tasks and skills that they need to have to help continue what our goals are.
No, thank you, Mike. These are really great directions and a great heading for what you folks have done there in Kentucky. Ken, anything that you would like to add or take us up on?
Yeah, sure. No, I'd love to build off of how Mike had framed that out. It's all really critical items that he touched upon. From a facilities and a building geek view, the profession has been changing for quite some time, but the general population wasn't aware of it. So we're familiar with having to call 2 different HVAC technicians, one that can swap out a motor, that can turn wrenches, and the other one that shows up with a laptop. Both are critical. So from an indoor air quality standpoint, the position and the career and the professions have split and splintered a little bit, where you really have to be tech savvy in order to make it in this new market. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there. I do think, every profession across the board has had a hard time through the pandemic with people reevaluating their life decisions and figuring out, what do I want to be when I grow up? We've had the big quit on our end from public sector, both facilities directors, custodians, mechanics, you name it, across the board. So now we're faced with a problem of, we have people leaving these positions, but we don't have an adequate pool of qualified workers applying for these jobs. So how do we entice them? How do we get them to come on board? How do we make them excited and happy about working in our industry? And to Mike's point, the boomers are leaving and the Gen Zs are coming in and the millennials are coming in. Well, you better know how to lead and manage that new demographic that's coming into your building, because it's a different approach. Much like curriculum instruction in our schools, it's differentiation of instruction. You teach to the student, not to the class. Well, in our profession, I think we need to lead and manage to the employee, not to the entire group. Everyone, you need to meet them where they're at, right? And that's just good leadership and good management. And Mike sounds like he's got this on lockdown. with his department. Lessons from the pandemic, again, it's, it's educating our custodians to let them know where, a good baseline for carbon dioxide levels are in your buildings, which could tell you how much fresh air makeup you're getting through there. How to evaluate air changes per hour. What does CFM mean? All these things that are on our sophisticated building controls, they were just numbers and things that they would look at prior to this. Now, teaching them and making sure they understand when they go and hit override in a control system, what does that mean? And we talk a lot about these sophisticated buildings, but across the country, we also have some fairly old infrastructure out there. We have buildings from the 50s. Hell, in Boston, this is a building from the early 1900s that has steam radiators in their fresh air intake. Their design is to open the windows. I'm sure in some of the rural parts of Kentucky, Mike's familiar with the same idea, that it's a one-room schoolhouse somewhere that, who knows? It's a diverse group of schools that we have throughout the country. And there's no reason that school that was built in 1950s still can't be functioning optimally per its design. It's those are the things that I think really hit home with the pandemic. And Raffi, how you opened up with the comment that, President Biden has set a new goal for, the ZE for all government buildings. That's great. How are you going to achieve that? Where's the funding strategy to achieve that? How are you building up this workforce to build all these new buildings? Some of our rural parts of this state here, you drive by a town hall and there's a blue tarp on the roof because they can't afford to replace the roof shingles. You expect that community to be ZE by 2030? They're barely getting by. It's these old mill towns where all the industry left and you're just left with the tax burdens right on the bedroom communities. So I think there needs to be a holistic approach view of everyone knows going ZE and shifting to carbon neutrality makes sense. I hope. Granted, I'm from Massachusetts, so we're kind of we're leading that way anyway. So call me a liberal if you have to, but the greening of the grid, the greening of how our buildings are, we're on board with that. But the pragmatic part of me thinks that we need to figure out how to fund it. And then we need to figure out how to sustain it. And we need to figure out how to build up that next generation of building scientists who get it, because everything is changing so fast and we're just trying to play catch up.
Right. Now, clearly the pandemic brought a lot more of the school environment and the impact on our learners and our staff that work in those buildings. And it's part of the conversation. High performing schools, Z&E, we're setting lofty goals out there, and I agree that we need to have a plan, we need to have a team, and can they execute? There's a lot to those three legs of that stool, and I look forward to joining folks like yourself, the school building authorities across the country, folks that have done meaningful projects like they have in Kentucky and elsewhere. It's going to take a lot of work, but never has there been an alignment of policy funding.
Right.
Part of that announcement also indicated that still there's $203 billion that has not yet been consumed in the school part of the pandemic monies. So there's tremendous financial resources that are available, maybe generationally, for us to go ahead and help to address some of these human resource issues and being able to get the knowledge and practice standards out there that it'll be durable. It'll not just be for this funding cycle, it can sustain itself going forward.
Right, but it's not going to be, I hazard the listeners that it's not going to be instantaneous. While we have a once in a generation opportunity with funding, there's not enough design professionals to design the renovations. There's not enough mechanical engineers to design the new things. There's not enough builders. There's not enough licensed tradespeople to pull off spending all of this money within the next 2 years. This is a really, really difficult thing that and I've had discussions across the board. We're trying to build solar farms and wind power, but we don't have electricians. We don't have enough people. So, we're in this weird juxtaposition now that it's like, yeah, we know what we need to do. We're struggling to pull it off because we just don't have the skilled labor out there to do it. From the design to the installer to the commissioning agent, all of it. It's the market's really, really thin right now getting people to do this kind of work.
Well, it sounds like there's ample opportunity to promote this as a pretty suitable career choice growing forward, because there's going to be ample opportunity. Remember when we recently visited the Cape Cod Vocational Technical School, there was a sign in the plumbing department saying that, jobs are out there for $95 an hour. I mean, there's a need for these types of skills, and the educational tracks to be able to participate in helping to assure buildings operate well, and they'll rely on a lot of trades. Question maybe to both you and Mike again, as we consider moving towards the wrap up, getting close here in 9 minutes, I think. Is there a better way to do your job, and what would that look like in terms of leading, a team of building operators in this era of, information technology, and being accountable to, the folks and the families and the teachers that live in your communities?
I think the conversation has changed post-pandemic. I think people realized how much deferred maintenance was actually in the market, and how many pieces of equipment were broken and not working in our schools. So I think there's two important components to consider to do a better job. First of all, there were a ton of schools that didn't have a good handle on their inventory of equipment. They didn't have life cycle analysis. They didn't, have a legitimate preventative maintenance program set in place. When we came and checked these buildings, to see that we had the right air coming in, 25 to 30% of the equipment was dead in the water. So I think assessing what you have, making sure everything's working, and have both short and long-term goals for your equipment upgrades, I think it's critical. I think it's also critical to realize that most schools are understaffed. We keep building buildings, we make bigger buildings, we put high performance buildings, and I see, we'll add a 0.5 FTE custodian because we gained 30,000 square feet of space. Or, we'll just, we have one plumber in district, so it's okay. They can take on that other building because it's new and it doesn't need as much maintenance. I love that one. Our HVAC tech can handle it. It's a new building. There won't be any problems. Oh my God. The newer buildings have more problems than the older ones. So I think doing a deep dive on your staffing levels to make sure that you're adequately staffed. And from a facilities director standpoint, every time we keep adding more work responsibilities to their plate, we typically don't add additional leadership support, meaning a facilities director might not have an assistant. They might not have a custodial supervisor, yet we keep adding onto their plate all these other responsibilities. So when you're sitting with your school boards, when you're sitting with your superintendent, when you're looking at budgeting, make sure you're looking at those staffing needs, because just over the past month and a half in Massachusetts, I've posted 8 facilities directors positions for public schools. That I have never posted that many jobs openings in one short period of time. People are burning out. People are getting fried. They don't feel supported. So I urge everyone, if you're in a position to help support, that's a great place to look at it. Use these funds to look at staffing, to look at equipment, to look at life cycle, and that would certainly improve the overall performance of the maintenance and operations department. It would reduce absenteeism, and it would make our occupants healthier. It's kind of cool that you have an opportunity to give people a healthier lifestyle.
I'm going to jump in here because we only have a few more minutes left. I see a couple questions. Raffi, did you catch those?
Yeah, no, I was actually seeing that you had responded to, and I was going to give Mike a chance and then go to some of these last questions if you wanted to add anything here.
Well, I would just echo what Ken had mentioned about staffing is an issue. I've been in this position for almost 7 years. I've been fully staffed on the custodial side of things. Out of those 7 years, 3 months. So the pandemic just exacerbated a situation that I was already facing. And even today, I've got, I have a school that had no daytime custodians because they were both out with COVID. So I had to scramble resources to reallocate to make sure that we had custodian in the building to make sure we got through the Friday this week. And next week we'll look at what next week looks like. But a lot of ways, what we try to do is to be, preventative maintenance isn't just a buzzword. It's a real thing. If you can prevent things from happening, it saves you a whole lot of time, money, manpower hours to go back in and fix something that maybe you could have caught on the front end. So preventative maintenance is huge. If you don't have enough people, you've got to automate. You got to have technology to take over that. So we're working on that. For example, I just rolled out a fleet of robotic floor scrubbers. So we're the first district in the state of Kentucky to have autonomous floor scrubbers that clean the floor without a person walking or riding on it. That's really neat. It got some positive buzz in the local news, paper, and television stations. But the reality is, there's some tasks that go undone. And so if I can get a machine to do that, absolutely I will. But there's the training goes on. It's never ending. Like I said, not just for new hires, but for our existing staff, because technology changes. And just because we've always done it a certain way doesn't mean we're going to continue to do it that way. But, human beings, I'm a human being. I get stuck in my ways and I get in my comfort zone. And so we all have to be willing to, kind of stretch ourselves and learn new tasks and the technologies that at the end will help make our job a little bit easier, but maybe there's some growing pains on the front end.
A question, Mike and Ken, that came in from one of the folks that are on this call, Sarah Ross, was question is, what is the right altitude for reporting to school boards? And is there a best practice that you would recommend to school boards and to parents?
We're pretty transparent with all the information we give out. And we're working on this to make it even more robust, but we have dashboards that anyone can use, log on to take a look at their school. We don't have that for every school. So we want to roll that out so that every parent, every taxpayer for that matter, even if they have a child in the school, can see where their tax dollars are going. Are we being efficient with what we're doing? A lot of it's just accountability. Are we doing what we say we're doing? But we report annually at the minimum to our school board to let them know where we are on our cost avoidance with our energy savings. So there's that. But anytime we roll out a new initiative, we let them know too, what's the initial cost going to be? What's the cost savings projected over time? So that helps our school board become more confident with the decisions that they make. If they're making an expenditure on a brand new school to replace an outdated school, or if it's, an outlay of funds to get more technology to help monitor the situation, we can justify that easily with the information that we share, not just with the board, but with the community at large.
And there's some other than what Mike had discussed. There's also some smaller little tricks of the trade. And I know it's 2021, but I think every maintenance department should have a web page that's linked from their school's home web page that has relevant current information posted. Hey everyone, we're green cleaning. This is what it means for us. We're happy to help you out. Communicate with parents, let them know that there's a resource. They can go and look at the HERA plans and look at your integrated pest management plans and look at, your energy conservation things. Maintenance departments historically have always stayed behind the curtain. We're horrible cheerleaders for ourselves. We really are. We just want to go in, we want to do our job, and that's it. I think I've seen some really amazing facilities directors really leverage social media. There's one gentleman up in New Hampshire that I follow on LinkedIn, and he's always posting pictures of his team doing amazing work. Hey, we're replacing a rooftop unit on the high school. This is going to have MERV 13 filters. We're going to have safer air quality. Crushing it. Go team. There's a lot of different things you can do behind the scene. I think benchmarking when you're doing your budget and coming at your budget presentation to defend it from a point of data, I think is critical. Know what your neighbors are spending per pupil or per square foot. to try and figure out where do we fall into that scheme of things. Are we in the middle of the pack? Are we lower? Are we higher? Don't come at it from a point of, we need more money, because you need to really sell your budgets. It sounds easier than it is. I have struggled my whole career to try and sell it, much like Mike. You know, being in where I was for close to 17 years, I probably had full staff one of those 17 years. You know, it's always something that gets cut, and it's arguments and discussions during budget meetings with teacher union, you know, presidents saying, why do you need an HVAC technician? It's like, I don't know. Do you like heat? Do you like fresh air? Then we kind of need one. So it's not easy, and I don't envy the folks that are in those roles right now, especially now, because we have raised the level of performance of our buildings to a point that I don't know if schools realize what it's going to take to sustain that.
Yeah, in short, it's real work that needs to have real staffing and a budget that's going to be able to support it. I mean, it's not something that you can just close your eyes to and it'll take care of itself. I mean, you know, Mike's been fortunate to be able to make the case and get the support around it. Look forward to learning more about what's in his tool bag there to go ahead and make that happen. One last question, and I think we'll be getting close to a wrap, and that was, what is the fastest way to become a facility director? And to be like, if it's certain qualifications or certifications, but either one of you guys can jump in on what you think is the fastest way to become a facilities director.
I think that might be depending on the location geographically, you know, that might be some of the drivers. Depending on the size of the community that you're applying for the position, they may have different requirements. In Massachusetts, you know, historically, you need to be a licensed builder, have your construction supervisor's license. That's what we call it in Massachusetts anyway. So that way you can pull permits, say you're going to renovate a science classroom or something. Right. Having experience from the trades has certainly been helpful. Some communities having experience from the custodial industry, that might be something that they're focusing in on. There's opportunities out there. It seems having an entry-level position as an assistant director, kind of getting your feet wet a little bit, learning about state, you know, bidding requirements. You know, how do you have to bid out this project? Learning, you know, different. It's funny when I applied for my job, I was, oh my God, I was young. I think I was 26 when they hired me as a facilities director. I don't know what the hell they were thinking or drinking. But I went to community education classes to learn how to use Microsoft Office. You know, I come in it from being a licensed plumber. I knew nothing about it, but I knew I needed to know how to use Excel and how to do PowerPoints and how to do, you know, you use all that stuff. So there's a lot of things that you can go work on your soft skills while you're looking. But I think that, you know, stepping into an assistant role first certainly raises your credentials. So you do that for 2 or 3 years, you prove yourself, and that seems to be a good gateway into having a look, you know, when you're applying for the director level position. An interview, go interview, follow up with them, ask how you did, you know, what were the things, why didn't you give me the job? All those kind of, you know, best practices that are out there in the interviewing world, same applies for facilities directors.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I would agree that it's pretty state specific. There are online certifications that you can get depending on the program and how in depth they go, from a few hundred to, you know, a few. I haven't seen for a few thousand, but maybe upwards of $1,400-$1,500 depending on the certification that you get. In the state of Kentucky, the Kentucky School Plant Managers Association has a program which I'm currently getting ready to enroll in for certification for facilities director from them. They have 2 tracks. One is for the maintenance side of things. One's for the custodial. I'm currently responsible for the custodial function in our district, so I'm taking that track first, but I also intend to take the maintenance, although I'll never be the maintenance director here. That's not necessarily my interest per se. In addition to being facilities director, I'm also the energy manager. So the maintenance track would I think go hand in hand with my responsibilities as the energy manager. So there's there's different tracks you can take depending on what your interest level is.
I want to thank you both very much, and Raffi as well. This has been excellent. I know it's a topic we could talk a lot more about. It is time to end. So we do have on this last slide that will go out in the deck a number of resources, and most of these are the national links, but as Mike just mentioned, there are state and local versions or affiliates that you should look for your own area. Like the School Plant Manager Association, for example. So thank you again, everybody, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. I will be sending out the recording and the slides next week.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
guys.
Have a safe
you all.
holiday season. Take care.